Hi. My name is Claudia Anderson, and I'm a member of this library board, lucky me. It's my great pleasure today to introduce you to someone whom you all know, and you already have enormous affection for. When the responses started to come into this event, we wondered how many are really coming, not for the wine, not for the food, not to see their friends, but they're coming for Martha. So I'll keep this very brief. Martha told me as we were coming in that she started working for Kitsap Regional Library in 1968. She was just but a little girl. And then worked off and on until 2 years ago when she retired. Retirement, of course, gives us wonderful time, theoretically, to read more books. So in her last position with KRL, she was the fiction selector, which makes her eminently qualified for the talk this afternoon. She is a popular speaker, and if any of you in here have not heard her before, you'll soon know why. So please join me in welcoming Martha Bayley.
Wow, nearly full room. I appreciate that. I want to thank the board of Bainbridge Public Library and Rebecca Judd for once again extending the invitation to me to talk about my love of reading. As some of you know, I retired from ordering books, you just heard that, for the library system actually 3 years ago, and I have to admit, at the time I felt somewhat like a Roz Chast cartoon character, you know, with the little cloud over my head, and that was because I was worried about the future of libraries, bookstores, the publishing industry. I just didn't know how we were going to go through this transition to the digital age. Well, I want you to know I have quit worrying. Not only at libraries and bookstores, they're hanging in there, but the number of books that are being published keeps on increasing. In fact, I have been astounded by not only the quantity, but the quality of the books that have come out just since January. I call it a veritable smorgasbord, and I hope you will agree. So, first a question. How many of you read Stephen Ambrose's Undaunted Courage? Any of you in the audience read that book? Well, when I read that, I was just astounded by what seemed to be the perfect combination of good luck and good decision-making. Now, the first book I want to talk to you about, and of course all of you should see your bookmarks there, is Peter Stark's Astoria, John Jacob Astor, and Thomas Jefferson's Lost Pacific Empire. And I have to tell you, Peter Stark just flips the coin here. This is nonfiction. Astoria is the tale of one of the most disastrous expeditions of all time, just 6 years after Lewis and Clark triumphantly returned. So the book again focuses on Thomas Jefferson and his quest for the Northwest Passage. Only this time, he let John Jacob Astor, a very wealthy New York businessman, foot the bill for the expedition. He had 2 expeditions he was going to pay for, one across the land and one around South America, and they were hopefully to meet up on the coast there, right where the Columbia River comes out. Now the goal, of course, for Astor, why would he want to do this? Well, he wanted to control the fur trade. And of course, Thomas Jefferson wanted to establish the territorial boundaries of the United States. Now, Astor, because he was footing that bill, was in charge. And of course, this is where the disaster starts. He chose the wrong people, they made the wrong decisions, they had the wrong attitudes, and they went the wrong way. This is one of these books where I just spent the whole time going, no, don't do that, don't do that. So I'm not going to tell you much more, other than to say that the overland expedition started out a little too late in the year. And they decided not to follow Lewis and Clark's route. So, then the sea expedition around the Cape Horn, the captain that was put in charge makes Bligh of Mutiny on the Bounty look like an English nanny. You can see where this story is going. So Peter Stark, who writes for Outside Magazine, has an uncanny ability to describe the extremes of the wilderness experience and what it does to human beings. So be prepared. Also, he has a great ability to describe the power of the sea. So you have these two great stories going on. What I also loved is his description of the Columbia River, which I will never look at again in the same way. And also his descriptions of what they meant in terms of the Indian tribes that lived in the Northwest. This is just a wonderful read. I always like to start with one of my favorites, and this is it. Now, even though this expedition was a failure, John Jacob Astor was so fascinated with the story that he hired Washington Irving to write a book about this expedition. And that book was a big hit in the 1830s. And I have to say, I want to go back and look at it. I'd really like to see what Washington Irving would say about this. I am going to bet that this is going to be one of the big hits of the year. It's a wonderful read, especially for armchair travelers and those people who like adventure nonfiction. So, good way to start. So, next, I think you heard that I was the fiction buyer. I'm only going to talk about 2 works of fiction in this. I have to tell you, in my retirement, I tend to read more nonfiction now. I don't know why, but this book is called Love and Treasure, and it's by Ayelet Waldman. And this is the only one that hasn't come out yet. It's going to be released in 2 weeks' time. And this is what you call an advanced reader's copy of this book. Now, Love and Treasure actually starts in the present time. A retired classics professor, his name is Carl Weisman, he's dying of pancreatic cancer, and he entrusts a beautiful locket to his granddaughter, and he says, I want you to find the rightful owner of this locket. Now, during World War II, Jack Weisman had been the officer in charge of guarding the infamous Hungarian gold train. I don't know if you know this story, but the Allies captured this train that was full of Jewish belongings from Hungary. They were trying to get it out of Hungary and basically steal it and take it somewhere else. And Jack Weisman, in a moment of weakness, stole the locket from the train. He did this because he had fallen in love with a young Jewish woman, and the locket, there was a little piece of paper that said that the locket had come from her village, and he wanted some form of connection with her world. Now, Ayelet Waldman sets the stage with this story and then takes us back to World War II, and we relive Jack's experience. Then it goes forward in time to the granddaughter's search for the rightful owners of this locket. And then at the end of the book, it goes back to the early part of the 20th century in Budapest when the locket is first purchased and given as a gift. Now, I particularly enjoy historical novels that look at an object or a period, very closely. And if any of you have read Geraldine Brooks' People of the Book, this, I think, it's very similar, and I like that, how they build a story around that. It does make it a little complicated because you're jumping backwards and forwards in time, but I think these interwoven perspectives give resonance to the story. It's a thriller, it's a love story, and it's also a search and very literary. She pulled down 2 very big blurbs. You know what blurbs are? That's when other writers say, you've got to read this book. Joyce Carol Oates and Michael Ondaatje are just raving about this book. So this is just coming out. Now, back to nonfiction. So, this book was just released 2 weeks ago, and it's called Blood Royal, A True Tale of Crime and Detection in Medieval Paris. Now, it's by Eric Jager. Jager is a professor at UCLA and has a gift for finding obscure stories that bring the medieval world to life. Now, in fact, he is the author of my all-time favorite nonfiction book. I'm going to show it to you. This is a discarded copy. It's my treasure. That book is called The Last Duel. And this Last Duel is about the last officially sanctioned jousting tournament in the 14th century. It was a duel to the death in Paris, and they actually built a tournament stadium for this jousting event. Now, I've been waiting a long time for this guy to write another book, and boy, he has come through. Blood Royal is set in 1407, just 25 years after this famous duel, and it tells the story of the brutal murder of King Charles VII's brother. This guy was returning from the palace one evening with his entourage going through the dark streets of Paris, and boy, he got it. Believe me, he got it. Now that just sounds like a plain old tidbit from history, but it's not, because Jager, he bases this story on a 20-foot long parchment that tells the story by the man who solved the crime. And he wrote this in 1407, and the man who solved the crime was a man named Guillaume de Tignonville. He was the provost of Paris. So he was in charge of order in Paris at that time. And the King's Council got together and they said, Guillaume, you need to solve this crime. And so he sent out all his minions all over Paris, and he put together, and within a week, he'd figured out who had done it. And for that bit of brilliance, he lost his job and was publicly humiliated. So, the next thing that happened, Guillaume, before he lost his job, wrote out this scroll. The accounts of the people, the witnesses he took down. So this 20-foot long document mysteriously disappeared. For 250 years it was missing, and it was found in 1660 and then languished in this regional archives and then was rediscovered finally in modern times. What a story this tells. You cannot believe it. I particularly appreciate Eric Jager's ability to make history come alive. Most of us have heard the phrase that life in the Middle Ages was nasty, brutish, and short, but Jager makes medieval Paris come alive. It is just amazing. The people that were interviewed, I don't know if some of you have ever read Montagu, which was based on original testimony, and this is a lot of what this book is about, is you're just looking at the window of 1407 and what their life was like. Now, poor Guillaume de Tignonville, he really was Sherlock Holmes before there was one, 500 years too early. I'm glad we have rediscovered him. Kirkus gave this a starred review, calling Blood Royal an impressive combination of a mystery, a crime story, and social and political history. Truly true crime with a twist. It is really fascinating. And my husband, I think, has already torn through it too. So it's quite a read. So, now, let's see. Next. Okay. Now, as you can see from the titles I've mentioned so far, I love hidden stories. The tale behind the event or the person. And the next book is a great example of this. It's called Lincoln's Boys, John Hay, John Nicolay, and the War for Lincoln's Image by Joshua Zeitz. Now, I was first introduced to these two young men who are the focus of this book last year when I read The Hour of Peril by Daniel Stashower. Now, Stashower chronicled the attempt to assassinate Lincoln on the way to his first inaugural in 1861, there was an attempt to assassinate Lincoln. Now, John Hay and John Nicolay had been chosen by Lincoln already in Illinois. They were going to be his presidential secretaries, and they were on the train with him. And they had such respect and affection for Lincoln that they tried to act as personal bodyguards. They were so worried about what was going to be happening. Now, Lincoln returned their trust and regard, and they actually became truly, apart from his family, his closest confidants in the Civil War era. They lived in the White House. They were the ones writing his letters for him, helping him with his speeches. They both were gifted writers. And they probably knew Lincoln as well as anyone outside of the family. And in the post-war rush there were what almost appeared to be spurious biographies of Lincoln. There was still a lot of bad feeling towards what had happened, of course. Lincoln's only son chose Hay and Nicolay to write the official biography, his official life story. Now, what's wonderful about this book is that the reader follows familiar territory through an unfamiliar lens. Zeitz, the author of the book, has taught at Cambridge, Harvard, Princeton, and he masterfully uses the Hay-Nicolay letters, memoirs, diaries to give us a fresh view of the tumultuous times they went through. The biography these two young men wrote of Lincoln, actually, historians really feel that their biography is the one that really created our modern view of Lincoln. It's just a wonderful story behind the story, the kind of thing I like. So, too much more. I try to make these short. Believe me, I like to read. I don't want to bore you. It's a warm room today. So, back to fiction, but still the same era. I put these two together because we're talking about the latter half of the 19th century. This novel is called Under the Wide and Starry Sky by Nancy Horan. Now, you might recognize Nancy Horan's name. She's a widely acclaimed novelist, and her most well-known book is the one about Frank Lloyd Wright that came out about 5 years ago. It won the James Fenimore Cooper Prize from the Society of American Historians. Now, she obviously enjoys writing what I call biographical novels based on primary sources, telling in this instance the compelling story of the Scottish writer Robert Louis Stevenson. And what a tale it is. Now, Stevenson, of course, is part of the English canon as author of Treasure Island, Kidnapped, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, numerous other works. What Nancy Horan focuses on, however, is his scandalous marriage to Fanny Van de Grift Osborne, an American woman. A divorced American woman. Now, late 1800s. A divorced American woman who was 10 years older. Let's just say this was not according to Hoyle back then. Now, part of the reason I was interested in this tale is that I obliquely encountered Fanny first when I was reading Stevenson's Travels with a Donkey in the Cevennes. Now, this is his delightful tale of a walking tour in southern France that his parents paid for. They wanted him to come to his senses. So they paid for him to go to southern France, and there are all these little hints that he wishes that he was sharing his sleeping bag with someone else during his travels with a donkey, and it's pretty cute. So, Fanny was devoted to Robert and was eventually accepted and even embraced by his family. She was a creative, energetic, talented author and artist in her own right, but spent the rest of her life trying to keep this sickly man writing and breathing properly. He had a really bad chest condition in pretty miserable living conditions most of the time. And they had a very tumultuous relationship, to say the least. The Stevensons traveled the world together, spending time in Europe, the United States, and eventually ending up in the South Seas in Samoa. If you are wondering about the title of the book, it's from a poem that Robert Louis Stevenson wrote, one that he requested be his epitaph. This book is just a beautiful window into their life. And I think it'd be a great book too. So a lot of fun, very good. Oh. Okay, I think I only got 2 more, so I'll make this fast. Oh, one more. Wait a minute. That's right. I better quit right here. I was going to bring. I have been reading a book in the last few days that I was going to sneak in, but I didn't. Okay. Okay, I might. That might be a bonus book. We'll see. So finally, we're in the 21st century, and it's a memoir. I have to admit that what first caught my eye about this book was the cover. Each year I play a game with myself, choosing the best and worst designed covers of the year. I have this thing about covers. Dancing Fish and Ammonites, a memoir by Penelope Lively, is a beautifully designed, enigmatic title. I just had to discover what this book was about, and I am so glad I did. You may recognize Penelope Lively's name from fiction. She has won the Booker and the Whitbread Award and has written many titles for both adults and children. Lively has also written a prior memoir of her childhood. She was raised in Cairo before World War II, and that book is called Oleander Jacaranda. Now, she just was made a Dane commander of the British Empire, and she just turned 80 last year, and so she decided to write a memoir in the form of 5 essays, writing from the perspective of old age. And boy, does her writing resonate with me. I can't figure this out. I'm not quite in her cohort yet, but it resonated. I'm getting there. And for one thing, her feeling of being unsettled if she isn't paying attention to current events. I mean, it's like, I'm still here. By golly, I'm going to pay attention. And then her musings on why it is that time speeds up. You know, why things get... And she goes into cognitive science. She's a brilliant woman, just brilliant. And then her love of reading as her world gets smaller and smaller. And luckily, my world hasn't quite started that way, but I certainly love to read, as you know. And the other thing I'm biased about is Penelope Lively's love of libraries. She thinks that they foster serendipity, that unexpected discovery, and I understand that. I come in here every week and I have to hit the new title shelves. Even though I'm reading about books all the time, I'll see something that I may have missed. I love that. She calls herself a gourmet reader, and I have to admit that I wanted to read every book she mentioned. One of the essays is just on her favorite books, which is a lot of fun. Every one of those books I want to read. And I also was very moved by her final essay on the few objects of particular meaning, the stories that they tell in her life. And you'll have to read the book. But I have to tell you, the cover gives a clue. So there's that enigmatic title. What a wonderful, quiet, thoughtful book to read on a rainy day. And by the way, if you want to learn more about her and this book, they're interviewing her on Fresh Air tomorrow on NPR. So I think if you can catch it, you will see why I'm so crazy about this book. So, okay, I didn't bring my bonus book, but I'll just tell you very quickly, and this is for all you gardeners in the audience. I assume there are a few of you. There's a wonderful new book, it just came out, called The Gardener at Versailles. So you just remember Gardener at Versailles, and it's by Alain Baraton. He has been the head gardener at Versailles for the last 30 years.
Say that again.
Gardener at Versailles, Alain Baraton. It's nonfiction, and I can't put it down. It is just a wonderful view of what has happened to that property over time. He goes into history. He goes into his amusing, experiences, the naked runners, and all the crazy stuff that happens, the trysts in the bushes. I mean, it is just a wonderful tale. He has a program on French television. All his books are bestsellers, and I'm frustrated because this is the first one that's been translated into English, and I'm hoping that they'll get around. If there's enough talk about him in the United States, then they'll translate the other books that he's written. So that's my bonus book, and that's it. I just have to, I wanted to tell you, I did ask the library to purchase some extra copies, but if you don't want to wait in the holds queue, I also went down to Eagle Harbor Books and said, get some extra copies in. So if you want to, and also, hopefully these will also be available as ebooks, except for Blood Royal. Doesn't seem to be an ebook. It's more of an academic book. It isn't written like an academic book. It's a page turner. But hopefully, if you want to try and find these, you'll be able to get them on e-readers. And I want to thank all of you for being supporters of Bainbridge Public Library. It is so wonderful to think of this as the heart of the community, and it takes people like you to help us make it. So, thank you.